Welcome to The Driven Entrepreneur, where we sit down with visionaries, trailblazers, and entrepreneurs and discover why and how they do what they do. We'll get the backstory, plus plenty of life and business lessons along the way. Here's your host, Matt Brauning.
Hey, this episode is brought to you by my very own NLP practitioner course. I've been teaching neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, for nearly 15 years. It is the most powerful tool for communication on the planet, and it can be yours today. For a very limited time, I'm giving away my entire NLP course workbook for free. Go to nlpwithmatt.com. All the patterns, all the tools, and the techniques of NLP in the complete course workbook, the same one that we use to teach our live certification classes, yours free. nlpwithmatt.com. Get it today. Let's get back to the show. Hey, what's going on? Welcome back, my friends. Welcome to The Driven Entrepreneur. And this week is a very, very special week. Look, it's always a special week when you're tuning in and listening to this show, but there's a special reason right now because we are on the radio. We are on demand on every podcast platform. And if you're listening to this live or you're listening to this on one of the on-demand platforms, there is a science behind the entrepreneur vision for these platforms. And, you know, I love it. This has been my world for the last several years now. And I have joining me really someone who's become one of my dearest friends in this whole industry. And she is calling in from all the way across the world right now, or she's been living in beautiful New South Wales, Australia, outside of Sydney. We have an international #1 best-selling author, motivational speaker, intuitive business coach. And one of the most important things about what we're going to be talking about is an award-winning radio personality. She has over 2 decades of experience. And she has raised over $18 million for nonprofit organizations and for private companies, all through fundraising, much of that via the radio waves like we're listening to right now. And I'm very blessed and excited because I have been a part of that. I've actually helped over the last several years working with my guest, Christine Blosdale, to help raise funds for nonprofits. And I am so excited to finally connect and flip the script and have her on my show because I've been with her so many times. Christine, are you there, mate?
Yes, I am, mate.
And
I got to tell you, Matt, it's a thrill. It's actually a real thrill to be interviewed because I'm so used to interviewing you and other people. It's really wonderful to be the interviewee. So thank you so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, now, well, like I said, I get to flip the script. And I've been excited about this. We've planned this for a few months now. And it's going to be a blast for me. So let me ask you, put you in the hot seat. And the first thing I want to actually get into, you know, this is people listening to The Driven Entrepreneur. They want to know about your backstory. And it's funny, like as long as I've known you and I know a bit of your story, I don't really know this part. How old were you? And when you first started deciding to get into the media side of life, is this something that like back in college, you were like super interested in it? Is it a family deal? Or do you have one of those stumbling into it stories because that's just what happened? Tell me, how did you get into radio and what was that about?
You know what? My love affair with the voice and audio happened at a really young age. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And you know how some kids went at a Christmas morning when they see a bike, underneath the tree, they're very excited. That wasn't me. It was my mother had gotten me a Panasonic cassette recorder. And I thought it was the best thing in the entire world because it allowed me the opportunity. My mom worked really late at night and I would go to sleep, without her there, but I would leave messages and stories and I pretended like I was Christopher Robin, but Christine Robin, right? And so I would use that as a tool to communicate with my mom, but I found that I really loved it. And I loved radio. Back in those days, we had the little transistor radios, and I would hold it close to my ear and put it on my, tape it on my bike. And I just loved the whole medium of the voice and stories and telling stories. And as I know, that that's how we communicate as human beings is through our stories. And so I never knew that I was going to be in radio. I never knew that I'd be a podcast, coach or have my own show or anything like that. But I went to school and I was actually wanted to be a teacher. And then I found out as I graduated how much teachers are paid. And
I had a very similar experience with the ice cream man industry. Because when I was a kid, I wanted to be, some people heard this story, but I wanted to be an ice cream man. I wrote a note saying I'm going to run away from home to do this. And then you find out, wait, that's actually not a great job.
It's not. The ice cream man. And you hear that one song over and over and over again. That will drive you mental. Right?
Yes. But I did think the same thing for teaching as I got into really loving like the idea of teaching people and even therapy I explored, thinking about, should I do that? But same thing. It's like, gosh, do I want to be in a system that I can't control? And do I want to make, whatever, $21,000 a year or whatever the district is. But so it sounds like you had a pretty similar experience with that.
Yes. And because I knew I wanted to, isn't that interesting? Because I knew I wanted to teach and what I do is teaching. If it's on air, communicating with an audience of thousands of people, explaining who my guest is and why they need to, why my listeners need to listen to my, my special guest. But I knew that I wanted to teach. And then after I saw that, the pay scale, but also the first 2 years, they send you to some places that are not, that are usually far away. And just the whole idea just to me sounded crazy. So I did some other things getting out of college to survive and very entrepreneurial. You'd appreciate this. I made, because there wasn't a job out there that fit me, I made my own businesses. So I created I first started out as a fitness instructor. I watched somebody do an aerobics class and I said, I could do that. And I just taught myself how to do it. This was,
such an entrepreneur.
80s.
Yeah.
This is in the 80s, and so you could go into an aerobics studio or a gym and go, hey, yeah, I teach. And you just show them how you do stuff. And so I was starting off doing that. And then I realized very quickly that I could have my own clients. And people will pay you to actually go to their home and, work them out. And I just kept upgrading, I kept expanding what I was doing. And I created a smart bar instead of an alcoholic bar. It was, with herbal tinctures. And I just did so many different businesses. And then
you actually ran like a holistic drink bar?
Yes.
Where was this? In LA?
San Diego. No, that was in San Diego.
That sounds about right.
I went to college in San Diego, and I'm so grateful that I did, because San Diego in the 80s and 90s was awesome. Let's just say it was awesome. But I found that I still wanted to communicate more, widely. And I actually began writing and doing reviews on music and movies and things like that. And I got a gig with this little place called American Online. America Online was,
as you know, I've heard of that.
Yes, it was the beginning. And I can't believe it. I got such an amazing gig. I was an entertainment writer, and I had a column called The Daily Fix. And I wrote through a cartoon character because I didn't want to write through Christine Blosdale. Who cares about Christine Blosdale? But Beatbox Betty, oh my goodness. This cartoon character was so sexy and so vampy, and she had a martini glass in her hand. And I could be honest and do honest movie reviews and things like that. Well, when you have a credential of AOL and you go to a studio, a press, the publicity department of a studio, they're like, yes, you can come to our premiere, you can do our press junkets. So I got to interview a lot of celebrities, and I did it all through this cartoon character. Well, it was very popular.
Now, did you do interviews in person? So you go to these press junkets and do that?
Yes.
And if you did you dress like Beatbox Betty?
No.
She sounds hot.
No. If anyone who knows me knows that I'm the complete opposite of Betty.
Yeah.
The complete opposite. But she would ask those irreverent questions that, most of the serious journalists in the room, wouldn't ask. But it became extremely popular. And then AOL did that thing where they stopped having the people who were actually in those positions and doing those things. They just kind of got rid of everybody, and they went the corporate route, right? So just pushing, it just changed. Time Warner bought it and all that stuff happened. So right around that time, though, 9/11 happened. And as with so many people, when 9/11 happened, I stopped and I said, who cares what Britney Spears is wearing? Who cares who Angelina Jolie is dating? This is, that moment really changed my life, where I questioned what I was doing. I questioned what everybody else was doing and what we were focusing in on. And I was like, what is this thing called the Middle East? Why are there problems? And then I did my homework and I said, oh, I see why. I understand a bit more. But it was a radio station that I was listening to, and it was so fresh and so unique. And it was not a corporate run commercial radio station. And so that was KPFK. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I stumbled upon it. Pacifica Radio, I stumbled upon one day. And then I went into the office and I was so overwhelmed with how unique it was. I just said, can I walk around the station and just thank people? And the guy at the front desk, Steven, he's like, okay, yeah, I guess you can.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I went around and I just thanked people. And there was someone there who said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a
fitness instructor,
cartoon character.
Blogger for AOL. I don't know what I do exactly. You know what I do? I work at KPFK. So you stumbled into, that's fascinating. So you stumbled into, and I think there's a lot of people can relate to that. And maybe, if you listening to this, you should be thinking, are there these opportunities, right, Christine, that maybe there is hey, I heard this radio show. Why don't I go down there and just say hi or meet them? Or you get this favorite food from a store and you're like, why don't I should go to this, I should go meet the people, or I should write a letter. And all of a sudden this is your dream place and you never knew it was going to happen. I also quickly, before we move on, I wanted to say, I think how interesting is it that everything you want to do as an entrepreneur always had that principle of communication there somewhere, didn't it? Yes. Whether it's, the bartender being your favorite therapist, or it's the aerobics instructor teaching and speaking, or of course, with a communication company like AOL. And so tell me about this. So you walk into KPFK for the first day, and I know I've been into that station many, many times with you over the years. And I love it every time because, again, it's just like you said, it's an independently run station. So I've been to the iHeart studios in Burbank and done interviews there, and it's a very different vibe, to say the least. And I thoroughly enjoy it. What was your first experience when you began to walk around and meet people?
Well, I came from a place of gratefulness, and my intention was not to get a job there. It was actually just to say thank you. And as fate would have it, someone said, so what do you do? And I said, well, actually, I'm a writer. I do entertainment writing, but I write. And they were saying, oh, that's really interesting. You should consider, volunteering, because we could use help. And they had no writers. The radio station, as you know, has no writers. It has mostly hosts, volunteer hosts, and some paid staff. And so I said, oh, that's a good idea. That's a way for me to give back, right? So I just volunteered for the first week, a couple hours, writing copy. And I was not on air. And then all of a sudden someone left within those, week or two. And they said, would you like to come on and be an assistant producer and help us write and get the guests? Because I'm used to doing that, right? I'm used to booking guests and interviewing and asking all the questions, but I still wasn't on mic. And then what happened was, after volunteering, I got a paid gig there doing the writing. And as it happens, it's like that thing when the star breaks her leg, and the person who's doing the following of the script and everything, they're like, hey, get on stage, kid. That's how it was. It was like, we need you to get on the microphone because our host is not available. And I got on, and it was like, bam, as soon as that red light went on, I could feel it. And I loved the connection to people. It's a one-way communication when you're doing, a lot of times when you're doing a podcast show or you're doing a radio show. You might have a guest on, but you're really communicating to an audience that you don't see. And it's one of the most intimate art forms because it's all in your ears and you're imagining, right? You're using your imagination as this person talks. But most of it is people can feel your intention. And so it allowed me the opportunity to communicate. And instead of written, I got to communicate with my voice, and it was fantastic. And it just so happened that I was very, very successful at raising money for the station. And I can sell anything as long as I truly believe in it. And this is really important for entrepreneurs. If you're getting into a business just because you think you can make a lot of money, I would have you just hold back and think about what you're really passionate about and what you truly believe in. Because when you truly believe in something, if it's a service or a product or a book, anything like that, when you truly believe in it and you know it's going to help people, that has an energy of its own, and it's so powerful. And it also keeps your integrity in check. And that's one thing I can say. For the last 20 years, my integrity has been extremely high, because I do not talk about or offer or bring guests on that I don't believe are going to really help a lot of people. And that goes back to my teaching moment, right? That goes back to wanting to help people and educate them on ways that they can have a better life.
It's first off, thank you. It's so good to hear that. And like, I know that about you. And not every guest I have, and I'm sure same with you, right? Not every guest that comes on the radio or on your podcast do you know really well. Sometimes you just meet someone, you get an introduction. Oh, this is going to be great. And other times you know someone really well. But it is so nice to hear that side of the integrity of what you're bringing, the intimacy of the relationship. Because I think it is easy in the radio world to feel like I'm talking to the quote masses, right? It's like, oh yeah, you're just out. It's me broadcasting a message and who knows who picks it up. But you have never taken that role. You see the intimacy of the real connection and what you're bringing. And these are real people's lives. And I know you've brought the same thing from radio into your podcast also. So I know you've been doing the Out of the Box podcast with Christine for some years. That's, and I've been on that show. So definitely go in the archives, guys. Check out Out of the Box with Christine. Yes. Search for Matt Brauning, and maybe that's your first episode. And then you can move on and get all the rest of the amazing episodes. Just a little cheap plug for us there. When did podcasting come onto your radar? I mean, you could we have fun. We've both been to our friend Steve Olcher's new media summit, which is podcast centric, and you were named an icon of influence among many greats. I'm honored to include myself in that list as well, along with many, many other people that are doing incredible things in the world. When we were there and we're having this podcast conversation, you could argue, when did it start and what was the first podcast and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when did you really first kind of move from like the radio world to go, podcasting is something and I want to jump into it, and why?
Oh, it's really simple. Basically, because my day job, my job at a radio station like with Pacifica Network is to go on air and to raise as much money as I can. And that through fund drive shows, basically, for people who don't understand, it's kind of like
it's like PBS on the radio.
Yes, it's like it's a PBS model, or basically I am your progressive QVC host kind of thing, right? Home shopping network,
yeah.
But home shopping network for not just for crap, but for like things that really enhance our lives. So that's my job. And I wanted a format that I could speak to master teachers and people that I really love, I admire, and get their voices out over the airwaves without having to do a pitch, without having to raise money, and just have a conversation and help people, throughout. And the programming, I couldn't do an interview with a master narcissist during a fund drive show and raise much money, but I can do that as a podcast host.
Right, because who's going to donate to that? But it's a fascinating conversation and a ton to learn. That was actually one of
my most popular show.
Yeah, your most popular show. That's right. Yeah, every time I search for you, that pops up in YouTube everywhere and podcasts.
And I'll tell you, for people who are thinking about becoming a podcaster, you have to realize when I first started too, I had horrible equipment. I think I had a microphone and I had a speaker, and I was basically from the speaker, the sound, I would be, putting the microphone next to the speaker. It was horrible sound. The interview with the master narcissist was one of my very first shows. He did not want to go. Well, there wasn't like a video thing. He wasn't going to be on video. He didn't want to be, shown. So it was just a slideshow. And that podcast show, I turned it into a video, just slides and horrible audio. Okay. But it was such a powerful show. I have close to 300,000 views on YouTube from that horrible sounding show.
But it's certainly an interesting topic. And I want to talk about that a little bit with you if we can kind of break into, now that we know a little bit of like the background, your heart for the space, I want to get into a little bit of the tips for us. So all of the entrepreneurs out in the world, everyone that we're listening right now, we all have different styles of businesses. Some are in the expert business, some are brick and mortar, some are services, some are, in the venture capital world, et cetera. For you, when you think about someone using and jumping onto podcasting and getting onto the radio, first off, what are some reasons why you should try to dive into it? And what are the differences between, I'm going to give you a lot of questions right now, Christine. You just break it down however the heck you want. Okay?
Go ahead.
Okay. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is, in an awkward roundabout way, I think there's a lot of traditional quote unquote PR and PR companies. And it's like, oh, we're going to get your radio interviews and we're going to get publicity and all these terms. But when in the podcast world, you can be a lot more intentional and directional and action oriented as well. Like the listener can go take action. What do you recommend as far as like PR goes, publicity goes for most smaller business owners, entrepreneurs? Is podcasting a route that you see? I know I believe in that. I know you do too, but why and where does radio fit today, if at all, in that podcast conversation? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. I think what's happening is that as a society, we are turning off our televisions. And in many respects, we're also turning off the radio. We now have the ability to seek out the education or the information or the entertainment that we resonate with. So that's why YouTube, it's the second largest search engine in the world, and it's owned by the first largest search engine in the world. Everybody is going to YouTube. People are going to podcasting because, again, they're seeking out the information and the entertainment that they want. Some people are into true crime, dramas and things like that. A
ton of people.
You should say, you know how true crime.
That's one of the biggest. Yeah, one of the biggest categories.
Huge. But what I encourage anyone who's an entrepreneur, I think you should really consider doing podcasting. And when I talk about podcasting, all of my clients, I never ever have them just do an audio podcast. What we do is it's an audio and a video podcast. You want to call it a vodcast or a vlogcast, because you want to repurpose your audio podcast, which of course goes to Spotify and iHeartRadio and Apple Podcasts. And now, of course, Amazon is in the game because they know how much money is involved, right? But you not only want to do your audio, but you want to repurpose it for video and do it on YouTube, because that is where you're going to reach people. My little interview with a interview with a narcissist. that was a not so Freudian slip. Interview with the master narcissist. It got a lot of listens, and it still does on the audio podcast platforms. Okay. But nothing like YouTube. Nothing like YouTube, because that is where people are going. YouTube is our modern day library. People are going to that place to find out how to fix things, how to survive a narcissist relationship, how to lose 10 pounds, how to install a software on their computer. They're going there. So that's what I do with all of my clients. And if you are an entrepreneur, you really want to consider creating your own podcast show. And of course, I always give warnings to people. Do not make it an infomercial about you and your business. You will drive people. People will run away screaming if they can feel that it is a salesy, promotional infomercial for you. That's not what people are going to tune in for. You can, of course, you can insert, by the way, I happen to be a coach, and you can give me a call at blah, blah, blah at the end of your show.
But it's got to be a plug. It's got to be something that's just almost casual in a way, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and you can give directives to your audience. You can do take an action. If you like what you're hearing and you want to hear more, go to this website. Or if you want to be someone who works with me one-on-one, I do coaching. I do whatever it is. you can promote that, but you don't make the show all about you and your business. That's the first thing. I'll listen to newbie podcasters, and the first 10 minutes of a show is all about them. And I'm like, nah, bye, gone.
Yeah, it really is that way. And I remember, like, for me, I got introduced, a guy I was doing a lot of business with he wanted me to do a podcast. Oh, we should totally do this. And so I have online courses, and he was saying we should do webinars. And then he put podcasts kind of in that same area in like 2011. And I thought, man, I don't know if I want to do that. It felt to me back, almost 10 years ago, it felt like doing a webinar, but you got to do it every single week, custom, and without any of the direct, go here results. The reality was, it's night and day difference. They have nothing to do with each other. And as a business, and look, and I agree with you, Christine, I don't care if you have an automotive business, if you have a nail salon, if you're a coach, if you're a best-selling author, if you sell printers. Why in the world wouldn't you have a podcast talking about, having conversations, educating around that industry? And is that, so that's kind of your advice? And I know you have your most recent.
To share your expertise is really extremely important, and to realize that there's an audience. A lot of people say, well, who am I to have a podcast show? I'm just a single mother of two, and I'm trying to raise kids in a really rough time right now. Oh, hello. There's millions and millions of women and millions of parents, single parents, who can relate to that. And they need that. It's about being a bit of a support for people, but it's also about encouraging them and saying, you know what, you're not alone. And here's some tools, here's some coping mechanisms, here's some things. And sometimes it's just humor. Some of the most popular podcasts are comedy podcasts, because people need that release as well. Right. So there's so many different genres that you can do. There's sports, and of course, people who are into veganism and people with disabilities or differently abled, I'd like to say. There is a great need. There's millions and millions. It's like 65 million people that are listening to podcasts. And so chances are there's an audience that is really looking for something that many of your listeners, many of the entrepreneurs have to offer. But you and I are just both kind of cautioning them, just make it entertaining, educational, inspirational, motivational, but don't make it an infomercial about you, or else you're just going to have very few people listening.
Well, what's great too, when you say that, Christine, is that it takes the pressure off. Like for me, I feel like if I was brand new going, I haven't done any of this yet. Oh, I know I should do a podcast. I should get out there. I should, quote, get out there more. And when you realize you don't have to make it an infomercial because nobody wants that, it takes the pressure off. Like, what are some of the most enjoyable ones? Look at a Joe Rogan, the number one podcast in the world. And he just spends 3 hours just BSing and talking with people about whatever they want to talk about. And that's it. And people genuinely love real conversation. And I know you get into that and a lot more. I want to make sure we have time. Speaking of plugs for your book, you have the international best-selling book, your amazing Itty Bitty podcast book. And the subtitle is The Top 15 Reasons Why You Need to Tap Into the Power and Profits of Podcasting. So any entrepreneur should jump into in some way. And look, even if it's getting on podcasts, that's a great way to start. I always give that advice. I know you do too, Christine. Get on shows, get into the medium, start playing with it and have fun. And then if you really like it, you might just actually launch one for your brand. But what I love, and I want to get into what your book is, the Itty Bitty book, and I know your publisher, she's also a dear friend, has published many of our friends and contemporaries' books. Itty Bitty publishing books are essentially, how does she describe that? It's like you highlight all like the great parts in your long books. These books are the highlights. So it's just 15 super short, easy to read chapters. You can read it wherever you want, maybe in the bathroom, what have you. It's a great book to pick up, and you can grab more and find out at ittybittypodcastbook.com. And you can grab Christine's book. I know there's a pretty significant discount right now. I think it's like $2.99 for the ebook, and
it's cheap.
Yeah,
it's cheap. It's only $6.99, I think. Yes,
for paperback.
And I'm happy to say that it's an Amazon international. It's a number one bestseller And that is in the United States and also here in Australia. So I'm very, very proud of it. And I encourage people, the reason why they want to pick up the book too is not only if they're considering having their own podcast show, if they're an entrepreneur and they want to expand their business through having a podcast show / YouTube channel, they want to get it. But more importantly, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to be a guest on a show, and if you are an entrepreneur, you should want to be a guest on thousands of shows. It's free marketing, it's great exposure, and you never know who's listening. So the book also talks about that and gives resources on how you can be a guest on a show as well.
That's outstanding. And again, I think that's something that everyone should be looking at doing, and it's not when you're ready. There's something about podcasting. To me, I think it's unique. Could you speak a little bit to the difference between Instagram videos, Facebook Lives, TV commercials? I feel like a lot of that medium falls into one category in my mind, which is the interruption marketing, right? So it's, if you're going to do a Facebook video, the first 3 seconds, do something interesting and capture them. And you're doing this, someone's already scrolling and they don't know what they're looking for. And you're trying to stop them in their tracks like a billboard. But in the podcast world, and to an extent to the YouTube world, a lot of times it's people going there seeking, whether it's entertainment or education or mentoring or whatever it is. I remodeled our entire bathroom myself, and I can barely even flip a light switch on, and I did all of it through YouTube, like so many DIYers right now. Can you speak to the difference between, again, that is the interruption marketing, get them in the first 3 seconds, versus a podcast where you have a long form conversation. People come in and they sit in for the duration. A really high percentage of people, I think it's up to 80% of people say they listen to most or all of a podcast episode. They don't just scroll for a couple minutes at a time.
No, it's an investment. You see, there's something that's extremely valuable to us right now, and that's time. And that's why our attention span, though, is getting shorter and shorter as human beings, right? It just is, because there's so much going on. We, for the first time in human history, have not only access to so much information, but we're being bombarded by so much information constantly, more than we've ever been able to handle. 50, 100 years ago, I would never know what's going on the other side of the planet. Because our little world, our little hamlet, our little community is really all we see, right? But now we're connected on a much greater scale. So our attention span has shrunk quite a bit. The thing is about podcasting in general is that you still do need to draw people in the beginning of your podcast. That's why I say don't go rambling on a long introduction and talk about yourself. Get to the meat and potatoes, right away. But the beautiful thing, Matt, is that with podcasting, you could do a long format, an hour show if you wanted to. You could do a 30-minute show. But now, and I'm experimenting with this now, and I'm teaching my clients now to do these micro podcasts. It's 5 minutes or less. 5 minutes. Everybody has 5 minutes. And so they're really short podcast shows that get right to what you want to teach, what you want to educate or motivate. And those are becoming more and more popular because people will have 5 minutes. They may not have an hour, but by golly, they got 5 minutes that they can spend with you. And it's really amazing, the popularity. I encourage everybody to consider, if they're getting into podcasting, to even start off as a micro podcast and then expand if they want to.
Micro podcast. And then I'm assuming that when you think about doing a 5 minute or under show, one of the questions I get a lot, and I'm sure you do as well from your podcast coaching clients, is not just how long should it be? And that's a silly question, right? I mean, it's not, but it is, because in one way you go, well, it could be 5 minutes. It could be a daily 1 minute gratitude podcast, and you do 7 days a week for 1 minute. Or you could do a Joe Rogan where you're doing 3-4 hours and people are it's the number one show. So what's the right? I don't think there's a right duration. It depends on what you're trying to create. What about the number of times, daily, weekly, et cetera? Is that the same kind of a question to you? Have you found a pattern that's good?
Oh, I get that a lot, because the clients that I coach, they all have different time frames. They all have different amounts of available time. If you are going to start a podcast, if you're considering this, just think about it. It's like getting a new puppy. You can't just say I've got a podcast show, throw up an episode, and then 4 months later, throw up a second episode. You do need to have a bit of consistency. That's why I always tell people, be aware of how much. When I first started, Matt, I did the silly thing about saying in the introduction, Out of the Box with Christine, each and every week we're going to be bringing you, right? I said each and every week. And so for the first year, I had to every single week.
Each and every week.
Do a new show. That meant researching, finding the guests, communicating with the guests, getting the recording down, editing, promotion, blah, blah, every single week on top of having a day job. Well, that was a lot. And so now I've pulled back and I don't say each and every week. I do try and make sure that at least every other week that I have a new show that's out for people. But it's all based on how much time you can invest in it. If an hour every single week is too much for you, pull back, do a half-hour show or do it every other week. The thing is that you don't want to burn out. And that's what some newbie podcasters will. Yeah, pod burn.
Pod burn. I hate getting pod burn. It's like there's no tablet for that. You can't take anything for it. But it's true.
No.
What do you think about this, Christine? This is the metaphor I use a lot is when we're talking about launching a show or should you do that? I think it's a lot like getting pregnant. It can be really exciting to get pregnant, but a podcast is much more like a child where, like, say for a book, right? You write your book and you wrote your itty bitty podcasting book. It's incredible. You go through the gestation process and then you birth the book and then it's like the book's done, right? And you market it and so forth. But a podcast is like, well, now you got a baby, now what? And you got to raise the sucker. And if you're not in love with raising your podcast for hopefully years to come, Lewis Howes, one of the Show of Greatness, one of the bigger podcasts out there in the self-growth world too, he'll say directly, if you're not in love with the idea of doing a podcast 5 years from now, don't start it. What do you say to something like that? Are you in the same vein? It's like you got to really be in it and committed and decided, or do you have kind of a different take on it?
Well, I try and when I'm coaching people, my idea is to find out because everybody's different. Everybody has a different brand or an expertise. And some people, it is only going to be for a season. I have some clients that are doing a podcast show, not just for the sake of doing a show, but they want to do a book. And so each chapter of their book is a new episode of their podcast show. And so they have an end product in mind, an end result, right? So they're not going to go on and on for years and years. They just want to get that book on that particular, subject matter, which I think is actually brilliant. It's a great marketing tool as well. So I try and when I work with people too, is I work with more entrepreneurs who are trying to use their podcast as a business builder. So I work with them on imagining that podcast show as being part of a course, something that you can later repurpose it into a book, repurpose it into a part of your training course or seminar, repurpose. And when you have that, it actually helps with the longevity. You're more excited about doing the shows because you know that it's not just a one-off and it's out into the ethers. You're going to be able to reuse that program for other purposes.
That is really good. Well, Christine, I know as we kind of wind down here, we're always looking for time. And just like when we're on your show,
it goes by so fast,
doesn't it? And I've really enjoyed this. Of course, I hope everyone else has as well. So Christine, I'm going to leave it with, where do we want to find out more about you? What is the number one thing that we should do? If podcasting is an interesting conversation for you and you're obviously listening to a show, but you're thinking you might want to do something and you want to connect with Christine, what's the best way to follow you and connect with you?
Well, I would love to let your wonderful listeners know that if they're interested in having a conversation with me, I will gladly give them a complimentary strategy session where we work one-on-one and I find out more about what they're doing, what their business is, and how. One of my favorite things is to help people create the names of their podcast shows and get their website and all that stuff. So if people would be interested in doing that, they can contact me at christineblosdale.com. That's my website. There's a contact me button there. That's the best way. And you can see testimonials from people that I've worked with, but that's the best way to reach me, christineblosdale.com, and just say that they would like to have a strategy session. It's my gift to you, the wonderful listeners of Matt's show. And we got to get more people out there to share their gifts. share their passions and their expertise with the world. We got to get them out there.
And hey, and make sure, of course, as whether that's the first step or the first step is head over to ittybittypodcastbook.com and grab Christine's book. Check it out. There is, no shortage of testimonials and 5-star reviews. I'm still scrolling. I've been scrolling the whole time we've been talking almost. and
it's always nice when you have good reviews. Yes.
Yeah. And they're all on there. And we have, here, Craig Duswall, Axl Rose's former tour manager, and he's a good friend of ours. He's giving you 5-star reviews. Tracy in Australia is giving you 5-star reviews. It's all over the place. So get it, check it out. And then, of course, check out your podcast. Out of the Box with Christine, still a great show, phenomenal. Every archive show is available, so that's a good thing too. Christine, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for waking up so early, all the way from down under to come down and be a part of this together. Thank you, my friend. It's been
my absolute pleasure, and I'm so happy that the roles have been reversed, and I got to be interviewed by you, my dear friend, Matt Brauning. Thank you so much, love.
Flip the script. Thanks, Christine.
Flip it. Yes.
All right, that's the show for this week, and that was my friend Christine Blosdale coming in from Australia, of all places, a place I've spent a lot of years touring and speaking and working there, just having a blast. And I know we have listeners in Australia, so shout out to every single one of you. Go check out ChristineBlosdale.com, check out ittybittypodcastbook.com, get Christine's book, and just connect with her. She's a down-to-earth, real, genuine human being, and you will be so glad you did. When you message her, she'll actually reply, believe it or not. So stay connected. And of course, stay driven. That's the new tagline, isn't it? It sure is. See you next week with another driven entrepreneur. Bye-bye.